Welcome everyone. We're excited to share some country wisdom with you.
King Solomon had a thing or two to say about the path to wisdom. In Proverbs 4, he wrote, "Let your eyes look directly forward and your gaze be straight before you. Keep straight the path of your feet, and all your ways will be sure."
Join us now for country wisdom.
We got shelters deployed and multiple vehicles burning all around us.
What is the address of the emergency?
Call 5 emergency.
Go ahead, man. Pull up where you are.
Majority of our stuff. And we have Jacksonville and thinking that there can be so many bad people want to help. Heavenly Father, please help us.
Hey Brad,
Hey.
you made it.
Thank you. Thanks for the
man.
opportunity.
Thanks for
Appreciate
coming.
it. Yes.
Nice for coming out on this warm, sunny spring
Yes.
day.
Yeah. We picked this location because we thought maybe it typifies a little bit of your life, part of what you went through, burn down things, but fresh grass coming up.
Absolutely. New starts and new beginnings are a wonderful thing in life, for sure.
Yeah.
They
Janice,
can be
you got it.
chaotic, though. And you really had to start over, more than most people can even imagine going through. Before I ever met you, I'd read about you. And in fact, I've got the Time magazine here. You had an interview. You were, Hero of the Year? And it's hard to believe. It seems so fresh because I don't live that far from Paradise. And I live in an area that also gets threatened by fire. But you lived through it. Everybody knows where Paradise, California is now because it was worldwide news. What were you doing that day?
So that day started out like any other day. Got my kids ready for school, and about 7 o'clock in the morning, we're sending them off. And when we went outside, it was interesting because a normal, beautiful fall day, November day, would be clear skies. In this case, we had a cloud that was moving our direction. And that cloud was actually dropping at that point at about 7:15 in the morning, some ash onto our property. And so what does anybody do nowadays? If you want to know what's happening in the world, you grab your iPhone
Right.
or Android, whatever you own. And so we started to spend time, my kids and I, right on my front porch looking to see what was happening. And we discovered that there was a fire that had started in Polga, which is about 20 miles due east of us. And it started about 6:30 in the morning. So we weren't too concerned because 20 miles is a long distance. So I sent my kids off to school. I returned to the house and started preparing for my day to head to work. Well, I headed to work about 8 o'clock in the morning. And I worked at Feather River Hospital as the director of spiritual care and mission for their hospital. And as I arrived on campus, I realized that things were not normal. This was not your average everyday at work. We had first responders that were arriving as well at that time.
Well, first responders aren't unusual at a hospital.
They're not, but the number of them that we had was very unusual. There was activity everywhere. And I pulled around to our ambulance bay, which is where we offload and onload patients. And at the ambulance bay, I noticed that people were in full swing, and evacuation was in full swing at that point. Already. So I didn't realize it, but at 8 o'clock that morning, they had called for an evacuation. About the time I was leaving my house to head to the hospital, our staff had made the call. When I arrived, I hopped right in, helped move patients out into vehicles. It was interesting that day because typically you would think ambulances are supposed to come and move critical patients, which is true. But unfortunately, that particular day, we only had 2 ambulances that were able to arrive at our hospital to haul patients to a different location, a different hospital.
How many patients are we talking about?
It's 67 patients.
67.
It would have been awfully tight to fit 67 patients into 2 ambulances, which is impossible, obviously, to do.
How many critical?
I don't know the exact number of critical, but I would guess between 10 and 15 critical. So the ambulances took 2 patients, and unfortunately during that day, one of those ambulances burned in the fire. And so we, as staff, started loading up into our own personal vehicles and also vehicles that were first responder vehicles, as many patients as we could. And I was one of the last people to load patients into my vehicle. I had a little Honda Odyssey minivan, which is great for being a very versatile vehicle. So I laid down the back seats and made an open area for a bed. And we took a hospice patient, which was nonverbal. He was non-communicative. And we laid him in the back of my minivan. And then we took 2 critical patients, ICU patients, and put them in the middle seats in my van. And then I loaded up a staff member in the front. And this was probably about 9:15 in the morning. And so I tried to
How close
leave.
was the fire at that point?
So when I arrived at the hospital, I could see it like a chimney of smoke coming up from the canyon. So the hospital's located on the east side of our area, which is, Paradise is on a ridge. And so on the east side of the ridge, there was a chimney of smoke coming up, and we could see flames by the time I arrived. And so thankfully, it hadn't reached the hospital, but it was within maybe a couple hundred yards of the hospital as far as the flames.
Every time we turn around, there is another natural disaster. It seems like every year a large chunk of the world's forests and brushlands burn. Hurricanes and typhoons wipe out large swaths of real estate and human life. The occurrence of earthquakes is continually on the rise. There is a biblical reason for what's going on, and that's why I'd like to give you a free copy of the pamphlet called Making Sense of Natural Disasters. Get your free copy today by logging on to talkingdonkeyinternational.org and order offer 106, Making Sense of Natural Disasters.
You know the impact of Christ's message. It heals, it transforms. Do you have the eye for a great post, the heart for a kind comment, the skill to build community?
Talking Donkey International is looking for passionate volunteers, from seasoned content creators to newcomers.
We are a Christian community dedicated to sharing Christ's love.
This is a real opportunity to turn your time into ministry. Scan the QR code
to make a lasting impact.
Thankfully, it hadn't reached the hospital, but it was within maybe a couple hundred yards of the hospital as far as the flames.
Now, as this is going on, kind of take just a moment from that, and where's your family?
Yeah. So when I arrived, I immediately called my children and told them, you need to start packing up everything that you can that's critical. Pack up the dogs. Told my son to pack up his sister. My mom had been living with us because my wife unfortunately had passed away 5 months before. So my mother had moved into my home for the last 5 months up to that point to help support me. And so she and my children loaded up everything that possibly could, documents, etc. And my children had been sent back home, thankfully, by the school from school before I even realized what was happening. So our principal there at our school had wisely chosen to send the children back home.
If I can, this may be a little funny, but I want to break from there. You said you loaded up the dogs. You apparently have raised dogs too.
You had more than just 1 or 2.
And your mom's there to help support you. Why was mom there to help support you?
So my mom has helped us with our dog business. So we've raised Bernese Mountain Dog and Bernedoodles since 2007. We've had a business called Cedar Creek Puppies. And that business has been very busy the last few years because we added to it and have had a lot of puppies that we've been able to provide to families within the last probably the last 4 years especially. And so my mom was there to help on multiple levels. One of them was with my dogs. The second one was to help cook because I'm quite limited in that area. and help manage 2 children that were in school, and help me out with my business as well.
The reason, probably where I'm going with that is your wife was not there. Would you mind going into that a little bit?
It had only been 5 months since she had died.
Yeah, so if we take the story back a little bit, about 6 years, my family had moved from Montana. I was in pastoral ministry in Montana at that point. And when we were living there, my wife, towards the end of the 3.5 years, had almost an audible voice, but it wasn't. It was like someone spoke in her head, and it said, "You'll be moving to California. You have cancer. You need the resources that California offers, and you'll be okay." And this happened twice to her. She never mentioned anything to me. In fact, we had sworn that we would never live in California. And so that was part of our agreement we thought with God, is that we will minister anywhere in the world for you except for California. So for her to have that type of a message in her head, in her like almost an audible voice, it was very strange, and it stuck out to her clearly. So we moved to take a position as director of mission and spiritual care, which is basically a chaplaincy program at Feather River Hospital. And when we arrived, 2 weeks later, my wife was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And she was extremely critical at that point. When she was diagnosed, the attending physician gave her a month to live. And so this was a point in our life that was obviously life-changing. We didn't know where this would go, but we had faith in God that He knew where we needed to be. Malia, my wife, eventually told me the background story that she had this message she felt like from God to encourage her that this was going to happen and she would be okay. The resources would be there available for her.
But as a human being, you look at it and she wasn't okay. How do you reconcile that as a Christian? Because she passed away shortly after.
Yeah, 6 years later. So she was diagnosed, given 4 months to live, or 4 weeks to live, I'm sorry. And then eventually she did pass away, but it was 6 years later. And during that time, we had a lot of time as a family to do introspection and reflection on life and see God's hand guiding through many, many circumstances. She almost passed away multiple times during that 6 years, but God's hand was there, and He kept restoring her and carrying on her hope and her faith in Him, and also encouraging our family and our hope and faith in God through all of this. So to answer your question about, did we get the answer that we thought we were going to get? Yes and no. God took care of us. We are okay as a family, and I believe she's okay in God's hands right now. But as far as the okay, she eventually learned that to her interpretation became our kids would be okay. So our kids, when we moved there, were 7 and 9. And by the time she passed away, they were 13 and 15. And so they had a lot of years to be able to spend time with their mom, to grow in faith and trust in God, and to grow academically. My wife was a teacher, and so she homeschooled our children up until the last year when she was no longer physically able to. And she instilled into their lives everything that she could, from her faith to her educational abilities. She was a mathematician, statistician. And so my son is now an engineer, so he loves mathematics. So a lot of life she put into them, and life skills.
As a mother, I can tell you if my kids are okay, I'm okay. So I understand her feeling like that's what God meant, that her family would be all right.
All of this trauma now with the fire, and you're telling the kids to pack up, mom to pack up, continue on with it.
But you stayed at the hospital rather than going home to be with your family.
Correct. So if you are a hospital employee or a director especially, you don't get an option. I mean, that's part of what you sign up for with a hospital, is no matter what happens, you're there for the patients. And I know that, and I knew that, but it's very difficult because of the fact my children did not have a mother home with them. And my mother was there, but she was 70 years old, and she has some health issues. And so At the hospital, I finally called my kids up by the time I was packing up leaving with patients, and I said, you guys need to leave right now. Whatever you've done, leave. My son had had his license for 6 weeks at this point. No, 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks at this point.
Can you imagine?
And he had never driven our full-size diesel truck. He had never hooked up a 36-foot toy hauler that we own to the truck. And of course, he'd never driven 55 feet of RV. And so I had asked him to do all those things, to hook up a truck to a trailer and tow all of it, including dogs, my mom, all of our stuff. At this point, we had about 12 dogs.
12 dogs.
So they loaded everything up that they could. And by the time I called them, I said, you need to leave right now. Because what had happened in Paradise, unfortunately, is that there was the fire front that moved across town, but because of the 50-mile-an-hour winds, it was a firestorm everywhere. And so live ash came down and started fires over the entire town. So where you were at one location, you have no clue what had happened to the rest of the town. And as I conversed with law enforcement and for other first responders, I realized that the whole town was on fire at this point. It was chaos, absolutely. And so I called my children up when I realized this and said, get out now. I don't care, leave anything, go, go, go. Just save yourselves, get out of town. And so my children and my mom started heading out of town, and I attempted to leave with patients in my vehicle. At this point, by 9:15, it was utter chaos throughout the town. The beautiful day, clear skies, had turned into basically night. I mean, I had my headlights on, everyone else did, and you could hear the roar of the fire coming up the canyon. It sounded like a freight train. And as I started to move out into the road in front of our hospital, what I discovered is that it was gridlock once I hit the road. And unfortunately, we didn't know why. But looking back, an ambulance that I'd mentioned had burned on that road in front of us, blocking traffic. Other vehicles had burned in front of us. And so it had blocked a lot of the town as far as the ability for mobility for vehicles.
Are you completely happy? Do you feel like you're sinking beneath the waves of life? God wants to change that for you. At Jesus' request, Peter got out of the boat and began walking to Jesus, who was standing on top of the water. Peter did just fine while he kept his eyes on Jesus, but then he looked away. He started to sink. He yelled, "Lord, save me!" Jesus reached out and grabbed him, and they walked on top of the water, arm in arm, back to the boat. Jesus wants to make you a water walker too. This great book for $6.95, written by Jim, is the perfect guide to lead you toward that amazing experience. Go to talkingdonkeyinternational.org, where you'll find He Shall Lift You Up in the store. Don't wait. Jesus is ready to teach you how to walk above the waves of life that are trying to sink you.
Every time we turn around, there is another natural disaster. It seems like every year a large chunk of the world's forests and brushlands burn. Hurricanes and typhoons wipe out large swaths of real estate and human life. The occurrence of earthquakes is continually on the rise. There is a biblical reason for what's going on, and that's why I'd like to give you a free copy of the pamphlet called Making Sense of Natural Disasters. Get your free copy today by logging on to talkingdonkeyinternational.org and order offer 106, Making Sense of...
I know. Can you guys get them out without assistance? I don't have a lot of resources to send.
Everything's backed up. Where do we go? I'm scared. I have my kid with me.
I want you to go ahead and evacuate immediately. We do have the fire department in the area, okay?
Amidst all this chaos, you're stuck out there, and you have no idea where your son is. Learner's permit for a few weeks, and he's driving, what, a 50-some foot truck and trailer. What happened?
Yeah, so he had just gotten his license, actually, barely moved over from learner's permit. So he really, At this point, I was obviously concerned about him because he's a very capable child, but you don't just throw somebody in the middle of fire into the driver's seat and tell them to evacuate. And so I'd called him up and said, get out of town, leave now, because I'd realized the fires had spread out throughout the entire town at this point. And so he and my mom and daughter left. And then as I entered into the road, Pence Road in front of the hospital, I realized that this is gridlock and we're not getting out of here unless a miracle happens. Looking back, there were multiple vehicles that had burned in front of us. And so I went ahead and called my son up and I said, I love you. I don't know that I'm going to see you again. I love your sister. Just know that I care a lot about you guys. And I said, I don't know if God will get us out of this. If he does, wonderful. But if not, just know I love you. And that was my last conversation with my son. And I called a friend and I asked my friend to watch over my kids for me. It was a really tough call to make because my kids had lost their mother within the last 5 months. And I wasn't sure, their future, but I had to trust God. And it was one of those moments where that's all you can do, is just know that God is in control of their life as much as he is in yours. And so at that point, I focused on my patience again, and we talked about the story in the book of Daniel about the 3 worthies in the fiery furnace. And I continue to encourage them that God can get you through anything, no matter what the firestorms you have, that if he chooses, he can get you through. And we believe those stories are true. And so we prayed, we talked about faith with the 2 patients that I had, the IC patients in the back seat. About this time, I lost my lady who had worked at the hospital. She was an employee, she'd hopped in my front seat and she had left. And so—
To go where?
She was so afraid, she ran. I didn't know what happened to her. And then I found a person who was just a community member that was on the side of the road. Their car had broken down. So I added that person to my van as well. And she stayed with me for the entirety of the trip. And so we had 4 people besides myself in the vehicle as we continued to journey out of the fire. So we were stuck there for a couple hours. Finally, things burned around us. And the skies on that part started to clear a little bit. And it was no longer night. It turned into day. And there was, unbeknownst to us, movement from CAL FIRE. They were able to get a bulldozer into our community and started moving vehicles that were blocking egress. And so finally we were able to move forward. And I moved forward maybe a quarter of a mile, and there was a church parking lot, and I stayed there for a while. And then they told me from that church parking lot that we believe, can go to the center of town. There was a big parking lot with our Kmart and another, and it was a location where CAL FIRE was protecting the vehicles. And so I needed to get my patients out of town. I mean, these were critical patients, and I don't have any medical background. And so I went ahead and drove to the next location, but I had to drive through fire. I didn't know what was on the other side. And so I literally, by faith, drove through fire, made it to that location, and stayed there for the next few hours while I had a sheriff's department look for a way out. I told the sheriff, I have critical patients. They need to be out of this town into a hospital sooner than later. And so he, on my behalf, drove around looking for a way out. He couldn't even get out. And he came back once and said, no way out. And then he went back out and looked. And finally, about 3:30 in the afternoon, he found a way out. And he came back, and myself and a couple other people who had patients in their cars were able to leave Paradise. And we took our patients down to the hospital in Chico and dropped them off at that point.
You finally got out. Where's your children?
Yeah, how long was it before you knew about them?
Yeah, so on my way down the hill, on the Skyway, which is the main thoroughfare out of Paradise, I was able to finally get cell reception. So I called my children to see if they were alive. And thankfully, God was so gracious to us. They had made it out after driving through the fire for 3 hours. So they should have been out of town in about 5 minutes, and it took them 3 hours to get out of town. And thankfully, God had provided a place for us to land. The trailer that they hauled our stuff out in is what we lived in for the next 3.5 months. And where my son had parked it was at some friend's house on their driveway, and that's where we lived on the driveway, on the road in front of their house for
Talk
3.5
about
months.
driver experience, huh? He'll never forget that one, will he?
No.
You know, we don't have a lot of time left, but, you know, I mentioned more than one time, Janice did, you did, about your wife only passing away 5 months earlier. That trauma is still fresh. Now this trauma, everything going on, thought your kids were going to die. How did you get through all this in life?
The thing that got me through it is faith and gratitude. You know, throughout the trials that we had, we realized that God was involved in them. And we could see his hand as we traced things back over and over again, taking me to a hospital that had a cancer center. Many of our Adventist Health hospitals do not have a cancer center. There's only, I believe, 5 of them. And I was at one that was connected to Stanford. You know, that to me was a God moment. We looked to see how close we were to family. I'd lived in Montana, which is a long ways away from family, and suddenly we're now in proximity where family could come and help us. The fact that I had so much support through a hospital system, through physicians that became close friends and family to us, a church that was supportive to us throughout the entire journey, over and over and over again, we saw God's hand. You know, through the physicians that were able to get us into these extreme procedures that helped prolong my wife's life. Over and over again, we saw God's hand in it.
What about, you saw God's hand, but what about these people? What about our viewers right now who may not see God's hand? What would you say to them?
I would say look back at your life through the lens of where was God in my life in the tough circumstances? Because as I am able to do that in my own life, often it's looking back that we see him. It's not looking forward. Forward is by faith. And when we look back and we see God's hand in it, it builds our lens to be able to see him in all of the circumstances in our life, through the tough times and through the times when life is going great, that God is there. It's just we have to have the ability to see him and to look for him in those events in our life. And so for me, you know, faith is really important. And seeing God in the past has built my faith for him to know that in the future he will take care of me. He'll take care of my kids. He'll take care of my finances. You know, we live in a world right now that's very challenged financially. It's challenged politically. It's challenged in so many different ways. But for me, again, I have to look through the lens of faith, knowing that God took care of me personally, so I know he can take care of all his children in this world.
Amen. Amen. You know, I was thinking of Isaiah chapter 43. Says, fear not. I got fear not. When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee. When thou through the rivers, they shall not overflow thee. When thou walkest through the fire, thou shalt not be burned, neither shall the flame kindle upon thee. Wow, you know, Brad, I think about that when you're saying the fire was leaping up to the vehicle on both sides and burning people's vehicles totally up, and God brought you through. You know, friends, God wants to bring you through whatever trial you're going through, whatever is happening in your life, the fires that are going on right now in your life. Call upon God. He will get you through. He'll bring you through, right? No matter what's going on.
He literally brought Brad through.
Yeah, and God will do the same thing for you. Give it a try right now. Thank you for watching. Join us again for another exciting Country Wisdom.
See you next time.